Anything one man can imagine, other men can make real. Jules Verne.
My grandfather was a great visionary. Back in the 1950s, he'd already thought about making a Priorat wine, but at that time we couldn't afford such a huge investment. But it was always in his mind, and he was very interested in the winemaking history and culture of that region.
In 1194, the first Carthusian community was set up in the Priorat by monks from Provence. They were the first people to plant vines in that steep, stony ground. Farmers cultivated the vines over the centuries, and Priorat wines gradually acquired great prestige, until at the end of the 19th century, the phylloxera blight destroyed a large number of the vines. This plunged the population into poverty and forced many to emigrate. Vines started to be planted again towards the middle of the 20th century, with the aim of making top-quality wines. And by the 1980s, the great Priorat wines had begun to make a name for themselves.
In 1996, my father believed the time had come to make my grandfather's dream come true, and suggested we make a Priorat wine. It seemed like a huge challenge to me. The first thing we had to do was to study the soil, the climate, and the lie of the land to decide where we were going to plant our vines.
The Priorat is an unusual region with stony soil called yicorreia, made up of slate containing small particles of mica, which gives the wines their minerality. Slate doesn't retain water, and consequently, a lot more filters through than with earthier soils. In order to get to the water table and feed, the vine's roots have to dig much deeper, which means they can still reach water even when the surface is dry. Another of the advantages of yicorreia is that it has a very low organic content and an acid pH. This makes the wines highly concentrated and provides them with a good natural acidity, so they develop wonderfully in the bottle. The day and night temperatures in the Priorat are very different, which makes for optimum ripening in the grapes. The plants can't metabolize the aromas produced during the day, and this results in more aromatic and intensely fruity wines. Old vines are goblet pruned and grow on very steep slopes, while the younger vines are planted on terraces and normally use a training system called cordon royat. This creates a singular landscape, giving the region its own very special personality.
We realized that in such a mountainous terrain, we'd have to prepare the land before planting. This slow and expensive process of terracing took a long time, and it was some years before we could plant the first vines.
We started leveling the 47 hectares of the Porrera estate in 1997 and the 23.5 hectares of the Juar estate in 1999. We took 7 years in the first and 4 in the second to complete the planting of the varieties that best suited the conditions: Red Garnacha, Carignana and Syrah. With these varieties, and with very limited yields of between 1,500 and 3,000 kilos per hectare, top quality wines are made for our Salmos.
Right from the start, we realized we would need to reach agreements with the local grape growers to be able to make wines of high quality, complementing the grapes from our younger vines with those from older vines, to give our wines great concentration and personality.
In addition to the 70 hectares of Torres vines divided between Porrera and Juar, every year the winery buys in grapes from local growers. These come from vines that are thoroughly monitored by Torres. Some of the grapes for Salmos come from vines that are between 20 and 40 years old. And for Perpetual, they're between 80 and 100 years old.
We wanted to employ sustainable viticultural techniques, using the most natural treatments possible. Harvesting would be by hand, picking the grapes when they're at their peak in terms of ripeness, which can vary depending on the location.
Unlike Porrera, the mountains surrounding the Loire area act as a windbreak, making it much warmer than other areas in the Priorat region. This climate means that the grapes ripen almost 1 month earlier than in other locations. And we therefore have to carry out 2 harvests, and consequently, 2 separate vinification processes before making the final blend, as the same grape variety and same treatments produce very different musts and wines.
In order to produce wines that express the Priorat in all its nuances, it was essential not only to use good grapes, but also the perfect vinification process. For this, we decided we would cool the grapes on entry into the winery to avoid oxidation and carry out a rigorous selection process.
After the grapes have been sorted and separated from their stems, they're taken to the vats via conveyor belt, which helps to preserve their properties. Cold maceration is used before the grapes are fermented to maximize the extraction of the fruit and color, lasting between 5 and 7 days. Afterwards, the temperature is raised to between 25 and 28 degrees Celsius for fermentation. From this point on, the mixture is regularly pumped over, taking the wine from the bottom of the vat and pouring it over the top to dampen and break up the cap of grape skins that has formed. The wine remains in contact with the grape skins for a long time. From the initial maceration to the actual fermentation and afterwards, total contact time is almost 1 month. The mixture is then passed through a vertical press to delicately extract the wine. The wine is aged in French oak barrels for between 14 and 18 months, while malolactic fermentation is carried out in the cask. 100% new oak is used for Perpetual. The winery, located at the head of the Loire estate, has its aging cellar dug into the mountain to achieve significant energy savings as the right temperature is maintained naturally all year round. Solar panels have also been installed to produce part of the energy consumed by the winery, as well as collecting and using rainwater and recycling wastewater in its own treatment plant.
All we needed was to surround ourselves with the best people, a team in tune with the singular nature of the project, duly qualified and aware that good wine isn't made by just one person, but by the collective work of each and every one of those involved in the process. There were even times when I thought we'd taken on too big a challenge, that we wouldn't be able to overcome all the difficulties that kept cropping up in a project of such size. But it was well worth trying, and that's what we did.
Today, Torres Priorat is one of the Priorat wineries that most respects the environment, producing 2 of the most highly rated wines from this denomination of origin, Perpetual and Salmos. These wines, which are exported to more than 150 countries, have positioned themselves at the head of the most renowned wines from the Priorat denomination of origin, and have won some of the most prestigious awards and distinctions the world over. Today, we can confidently state that what Grandfather Miguel had originally imagined 2 generations ago has finally become a reality.